The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Quirky Dog Podcast, inspired by some of the quirkiest dogs you can ever imagine and the owners who love them. This podcast is brought to you by the quirky couple themselves, Scott and Jess Williams. Their aim is to educate and entertain. Here's Scott and Jess.
Welcome, guys, and happy Wednesday. I'm wearing Scott's Chaos Coordinator hat. I got it for him, but I'm normally the Chaos Cleaner-Upper.
I'm not bald enough to wear hats yet. Give me another 6 months to a year.
I'm normally the Chaos Cleaner-Upper, but it's messing with my mic here. All right, today we are going to talk about the fact that not everyone has to be on the same page, and this is a little controversial depending on who your trainer is, but we very strongly feel this way, and we tell our clients this all the time, and I think it gives them a lot of hope, and it makes them feel better about certain situations when they're like, but my spouse is never going to do that, but my kids do it differently and everything else. Everybody doesn't have to be on the same page, and it's okay. But first, we're going to start with the quickie tip of the day. Ooh, he sounds a little bit different.
Pig.
Yeah. All right. Our quickie tip is horseflies. So you've had more experience with this. Yes. This hot weather. You've had it a lot in California, right?
Yeah. Out in California, I had that Farnham's, I think it was called. It's a paste, and I would put that paste on my dog's ears.
Fly off, I think it was.
Fly off, yeah. Farnham was the manufacturer, I think. But I had my dog in a kennel for a good part of the day outdoors with some misters and a fan, and but these little I don't know if they're horse flies, what they are, deer flies, these little tiny flies that just want to bite the ears, can really tear a dog's ears up if you don't treat put some kind of repellent on there. So I would put that paste on the dog's ears, and it would just keep them from getting all chewed up, because they'd be literally bleeding if you just let the dog be tortured out there by these flies.
Yeah, maybe they call them horse flies because they normally attack the horses.
Maybe.
But you see it all the time with horses where, the flies are getting to them and everything else. But we've been seeing it. It's been a hot summer this month specifically.
I've been taking dogs out, and all of a sudden we'll go through some shaded area. Next thing you know, like 6 flies will start buzzing around the dog's head. It seems to be like the shepherds more so than anything with the really prick ears and everything else. But be mindful of that. Do not leave your dogs out there for too long so they get chewed up with these flies, because then they're going to be scratching at their ears, and it's just not pleasant. Think of how annoying mosquito bites are for you. You don't want your dog's ears getting bitten by flies. That's no good. No good whatsoever. No.
All right, so let's talk about it from your perspective. Not everybody has to be on the same page. How do you explain it to clients? What does that mean to you?
Well, usually how that conversation comes up is the family has a dog, and they want to do classes. And then they say, I need to make sure that everyone is here to listen to you so that everybody does the same thing. And in the beginning, I said, no problem, I'd get together with a family of 5 and start trying to do a class. The kids are on their phones. Like, no one gives a shit. No one's paying attention. And it's not my job to police their kids and say, hey, put your phone down, pay attention. That's not why I'm there.
I can't even do that with him with his phone.
Yeah. And so now I tell people it's not important that the whole family's on the same page. One person in the house has to be has to be taking responsibility for this dog and making sure that if you want this dog to be well behaved, that you are following through with this, that, and the other thing. But it's just not realistic that everyone in the household is going to be on the same page. And even if it's just you and a boyfriend or you and a spouse, as long as one person is consistent with the dog will work for that one person consistently. And if the other person goes in and spoils the dog rotten, it's not going to affect your relationship with that dog. The other person may get frustrated because the dog isn't really going to respect them and listen to them. But it's not going to undermine what you're doing with the dog.
Yeah,
that's
it's
really
so true.
That's the reality of it, in my opinion.
And we've touched on it before in podcasts. We've kind of mentioned it here or there and everything. But we really thought it was worth designating a whole podcast this topic, because a lot of trainers are going to get you, sit you down at your first eval or your first class, whatever else, and they're going to say, everybody has to be on the same page. That's number one. The dog's rules have to be perfectly black and white.
That's certainly an ideal.
Confusing for the dog. Yeah, but that's just not an ideal of how families live. And we see it all the time in our house. Like, literally right now, Jimmy is more reactive in a crate than normal. I used to be fully in control of rotating the dogs in the morning and everything else, and he would shut up for me. Now that he's been home with daddy, sometimes he's a little bit more vocal. My dogs with Scott, if he goes,
I let him have his agency.
Oh my God, you let him friggin' rule the roost. He is so poorly behaved. But I mean, I can reestablish control if need be. But like my dogs, they have very, very strict crate games, right? Like I touch the door, they sit, I run around, I do like the full Susan Garrett protocol. I don't even know if you make them wait, but Scott's not making them sit. Like if he opens the door, they could be standing.
I don't give a shit if they sit or not.
Yeah, he doesn't care, and it's different rules for him than it is for me. It doesn't mean now they don't sit for me. They just know I'm going to hold you to this criteria if you want to get out of the frickin' crate, and Dad may not. So it happens within our household, and we get paid professionally to train dogs. This has been how Scott has been making a living for over 20 years now, I feel like, exclusively.
It's going to be
long
a while.
time. Yeah, like this is the only way that he has, paid taxes and lived indoors and everything else. Like we are two professional dog trainers who sit up here.
You're supposed to pay taxes?
Stop. Who sit up here every week and try to impart some wisdom on you guys. And we have this same discrepancy in our own house. So I think a lot of times when we mention this to people, it gives them like a sense of relief. Like, oh, okay, thank God. If you never want your dog to jump on anybody, then that dog never jumps on anyone when you're holding the leash. If your spouse lets the dog jump on him or her when they get home from work, fine. Let it be. Live and let live. Sometimes it's easier not to have the conflict and not to be doing all this nitpicking and just kind of keep the harmony of the household, but you're going to keep things super strict on your end. And it may not be a popular opinion, but we've been preaching it for a few years now, and it works okay for our clients.
And I would say this also, all that being said, if you have a young dog that has some potty training problems or destructive behavior problems, and you have to be at work, you don't want your kids or the person who's not enforcing anything to be giving that dog total freedom to potty all over the house and tear things up and do all kinds of bad stuff when you're not there to, help the dog be successful. That's undermining the training. That's creating bad habits in the house, and you're not there, so you can't do anything about it. So in that situation, you need to make other arrangements. You can't let people be in charge of your dog or the family dog that are not going to take the responsibility of being in charge of that dog.
Yeah.
You just can't do it.
Look for daycares, look for professional trainers, look for something else. I mean, thankfully, potty training is normally a short span or whatever, but, and that's the other thing this leads me to. There are going to be some hard rules. If you have a dog that ingests things when the dog is not being monitored, then everyone is on the same page that dog is contained, that dog is crated. If you have a dog with heavy territorial aggression that is going to bite someone that walks into your house, there is a hard rule in the house that dog does not have access to visitors. They can get locked upstairs, they can get put in a backyard. I don't care what it looks like, but there also has to be some hard rules and very extenuating circumstances when it comes to things like safety. And by that, I mean the dog ingesting things, the dog having a police report or something else. And I mean,
getting potentially put down.
Yeah, and potty training is not a safety issue, but it is a huge pain in the ass, and you don't want a dog that is peeing and or pooping in your house for really any time, not even a month, but definitely for years and years of its life. It really skews things and makes things a lot more unpleasant.
People don't tolerate that for years and years. Usually.
Yeah, most of the time those dogs go to the shelter, so it's just a safety thing for that dog's life is now in question again, going back to a shelter. It could be euthanized. So, I mean, yes, this is, a little bit wishy-washy from where we started, but just as the basic rules go, if you have, you want really militant loose leash walking or healing or whatever you're going to call it, you do that with you. Let the dog maybe be on a harness for your spouse or your partner or your kids or something else, as long as they're going to be safe. Switch up the equipment they're using, or at least switch up the word they're using. Don't have the kids say, scruffy heel when they're going to let the dog go all over the street and, the dog's going to be pulling them half the time. But maybe they just say, let's go. And let's go is more of a management thing where they can sniff and they can be on a loose leash and the kid is physically strong enough still to restrain the dog if the dog sees a squirrel or something else. But definitely change your verbiage if possible. But and your equipment if possible.
Yeah,
but
kids could have some management tools on the dog, and the owner or the person in charge of the dog doesn't need those tools.
But don't limit your dog's life. If your spouse is the one that takes your dog for a walk when you're getting home late from work, or your kids want to get involved, let them get involved. Just kind of be creative
Thoughtful.
with how the rules are extended to them. All right, let's go to break super quick. And when we get back, we're going to talk more about being on the same page or not.
Want to keep up with all the latest from the Quirky Dog podcast like me and Murphy here? Then make sure you head on over to the YouTube channel and subscribe. Or if you prefer to listen to the madness, go on over to iTunes or Spotify and follow the Quirky Dog podcast. And hey, while you're there, leave a rating and review and let them know what you think of the show. Until then, keep it quirky.
Okay, so I guess another place where it gets a little bit hairy, if everyone's on the same page or not, is lifestyle choices you want to make for the dog. So stuff would be maybe pee pads. One partner thinks, yes, I want to use pee pads. The other partner doesn't. One partner says, yes, I'm into structured feeding. We're going to give the dog 5 minutes a day. The other partner wants to free feed. There's some lifestyle things that, yes.
Feeding from the table.
Yes.
That's a lifestyle choice.
Yes.
A lot of people like to give the dog, let them lick their plate or give them a piece of their hamburger or whatever. And I have no problem with that, but other people are totally against that. They're like, oh, I don't want that dog eating any human food. I don't want that dog near me when I'm eating. So that's something where one is doing it and the other one is not doing it.
Yeah, so when it comes to lifestyle, this is just kind of like every other lifestyle decision that you make. You know, make sure you talk about that on the front end. If you're getting knocked up and you're popping out kids, hopefully you and your partner have had a very serious talk about how you want those kids to be raised and what do you want to do for vaccine schedules and what do you want to do for eating and are they going to be raised organic and yada, yada, yada. Like lifestyle choices, you do have to be on the same page about, but certain things like rules and criteria and everything else, if it's a little bit loose, that's okay. It still can work as long as the person who really cares about the rules is enforcing them and they're enforcing the rules that really matter to them. I guess that is so important for you to realize because Scott can say, Sink loves Scott, my 13-year-old border collie, obsessed with Scott.
It's because I don't shower that often.
Up his ass all the time. I don't know why it is, but Sink like loves Scott. So he's always like, go away, like get on the bed. She'll jump on the bed for like 30 seconds to a minute, and then she's like back up to be with him. If I tell her, I want you to get on the bed, and I tell her settle, or if I'm teaching a seminar, she'll stay on a bed for 2 hours. So the dogs, especially the intelligent dogs, they also see like, okay, yeah, mommy means business. Okay, you know, this person doesn't. And we see it all the time with training too. We take the leash and the dogs are just automatically different with us because they know that we're going to reinforce the rules. So if you want certain things, let's say absolutely positively no jumping, you are always in control of guests coming into your house or how the dog interacts with people on the street. If you want 100% reliable recall, you have a recall word. You have a tool that you're going to be able to make sure that you get that recall, everything else. And if your spouse wants to take the dog off on an off-leash hike and doesn't have control, there's going to be a real big issue, you know, if the dog freaking gets hit by a car, the dog's safety is in danger. But if we're just talking about being in the yard and they want to call the dog, just do something that's colloquial. Like, come on, Buster, just say, please don't use come, or please don't use here. And if they've poisoned come up with a brand new word for yourself. That means like to me, whatever else. You need to get creative with what matters to you. And we have learned over the years that not all clients are concerned with all commands. Like some things are more important than others. There's definitely a hierarchy of importance.
Yeah, and I think, you know, with our dogs and all of their poor behavior, it's kind of like that rule about once, you know the rules inside and out, then it's okay to break the rules. And in a sense, with our dogs, we allow them to break a lot of rules because they know the rules and we can enforce the rules. Yeah. So we let them break rules, but they know when we're serious and when we don't care. And, you know, it's just a relationship that has evolved over the past, 13 plus years with the dogs in our house because the oldest one is, 13 that we've been training. Yeah. So they know when we're serious and we're not serious and when it's okay or when we laugh, when they do something really, that they shouldn't be doing. It's relationship stuff, you know, and it's the same thing.
And they're not endangering the public.
No.
The other day, Sink and Jimmy were on a bed outside. The Amazon guy pulled up. Immediately, I was like, you guys hop it up, settle, relax, lay down. A few dogs started barking. I said, shut up. No issue. Like, there was no concern. Our dogs are not wearing e-collars, not wearing tethers on the bed. Like, our dogs have free reign of everything. But they knew, like, in that moment, like, okay, mom and dad are serious. We went down. We helped the Amazon guy get stuff in.
They almost all work better under distraction. If there's nothing going on, they're like, do I really got to do that? I mean, there's nobody here. Do I have to stay on the
This is
friggin'
more
bed?
becoming a podcast of should Scott and Jess even host a dog
No, but
podcast.
what made me think about
versus
that
the
was like
rules.
feeding the dog from the table, that kind of stuff. It's like I can let Jimmy eat my breakfast and all that stuff, but I can also tell him to leave my plate and go get on his bed, and he'll just march right across the room, get on the bed.
Scott's most mornings delivering the rest of his plate to Jimmy's bed, and then we just hope Jimmy doesn't spin and knock the plate off and break it.
Yeah.
But these are all really important things. And then the flip side of that is any of our dogs. We own 6 dogs. Scott has 2. I have 2. We have 2 rescues. Any of our dogs, if there was an issue, either of us could bring that dog into the vet. We'd have amazing control. The dogs still work. So I guess that's it. It's just what is most important to you. And for us, what's most important is not having super strict rules. And we just want good control. We don't want our dog's safety to be at risk. We don't want a loose recall with these dogs and everything else. So you need to sit down and think, what is most important to me? And sometimes it's easiest to point a finger and be like, if Joe didn't do this, life would be so much better, and he's making life hard. Well, maybe you're just nitpicking at Joe. Like, I don't know. I don't know what to say, but like, you need to sit down and have a hard look at what matters to you, how you're going to go about that plan of action, and be okay. Give everything a little grace. If you're a perfectionist or you're a little OCD, give everyone a little grace and say like, okay, well, I'm just going to make sure I go the extra mile to prevent XYZ or to promote, ABC, however that looks to you.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword when people say to me, because it sounds like it would be easier on my part as a trainer when they say, listen, I don't give a shit about all this stuff. I just want the dog to come when called. Oh, great. So all I have to do is teach come when called, and then you're going to live happily ever after. But the thing is, you'll have a much better come when called if there's rules enforced all over the place.
Yeah.
Because then the dog has actually got an ear out for you when they do need to come when you call them, as opposed to, I can be crazy 24 hours a day, except Saturday once a month, we go to this place and I'm going to tear down the beach and then I have to come.
Yeah.
So it's better if you establish some control in a lot of areas, even if it's not perfect. And then the important things you actually work on to try and get them as reliable as possible.
Yeah.
Nothing is perfect, but as reliable as you can get.
And it's like this alcohol parent analogy, every day, you expect, dad or mom to come home and they're happy and it's the end of the day. And then every, 4th day or whatever, they come home and they're in some tirade or they're more giving than normal, whatever that may look like in your household. Well, that's not predictable, right? So you need to be predictable. Like, you need your dog to know that you're going to be predictable, that you're going to expect something of them. And that doesn't mean that when your spouse walks in the house, they can say, oh, it's okay if they got off the bed. You need to be able to step up and use your big kid voice and say, no, like, this is a rule that I want to deal with. You can do whatever you want with the bed, but this is something that means something to me. So I need the dog to be here until the dog is released. Those are the types of things that consistency, Scott's always consistently loose with the dogs. They expect that, they get that, they're okay with that. I'm pretty consistently like, no, like, this is my criteria and we're going to do it like this. And I also need to have good control of all of our dogs all the time, because whatever chaos we have that's coming in the door from our client dogs, our dogs need to be model citizens, and I need to be able to feel like I can walk a pet dog through the house and our dogs aren't going to be something stupid and everything else. But the dogs know that. They're very consistent about that, and they know that, okay, mom's a certain way and dad's a certain way. So make sure at least the individuals in the home are as consistent as they possibly are with either their looseness or their, tidiness with how they train.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a spouse that's consistently not on the same page, it's almost better. It's predictable. They're not going to do shit.
Yeah.
They're not going to help me with my dog. They're not going to take the dog out to pee and poop. If I leave them in charge, the dog's going to poop on the floor. Things are going to go wrong. But if it's always the same, I mean, that should make your job actually easier.
Yeah.
You're not going to give them responsibility. It's going to go south.
Have a friend come help you, and then maybe this goes into a whole nother relationship issue that the relationship isn't working for you anyway. But sometimes when we're nitpicking somebody else in the house, the kids, roommate, anything else, like, is it really that much of a big deal how they're handling the dog? Is that really what's making an issue? Or is it that you're not stepping up and rising up to the occasion and making sure that you're getting what you want? Because that's really how the dogs respond best. And we all ebb and flow with what matters on what day and how important something is, or a command or something else. But I would say at least the top 3 things that matter most to you. Maybe the dogs are never noisy. I'm a very anti-noise. I don't like a lot of barking. I don't like a lot of bullshit with that. Maybe recall is super important, and maybe jumping. Like, maybe those are your top 3 things. Make sure that you're actually spending time time investing in those things away from this person who's maybe a little more lackadaisical and training these things on your own so the dog knows that that's what matters when you are present. And if the dog jumps on another guest when your other family member's present, then so be it. That's your other family member's own prerogative, and hopefully it's not their elderly mother or a young child, and there isn't anyone hurt in that instance.
Yeah, and I will say that I feel like, when we're talking about dogs and these issues and basic client dogs, we're talking about kind of pretty normal dogs that are just untrained or looking for direction. There are some dogs that are super behaviorally challenging, and they need a lot more work than the average dog. And when you get and quite often I get those kind of calls too. It could be a rescue, it's their third or fourth home, and they're just like, they got issues. And you just have to be really, really consistent with
I'd
them.
say that's like one dog in 25, though. That's not really our norm. This is for the average dog where everybody is not on the same page. And I guess as a closing thought here, you guys who are raising multiple kids, you're learning, like, all the kids are developing differently. They're all becoming their own individuals. Like, it's not just going to be this cookie cutter thing. Yes, maybe everybody cleans up their plates and cleans up the table, and there's certain rules they follow, but they're all going to interact with the dog differently. And I guess as it is in regards to a relationship, Scott and I have a lot of differences in our personality. Like, I feel like a lot of times people think like, oh, like, we have to love this band and we have to feel this way, and like, we just really need to be on the same page about all things. But it brings a lot more diversity, and it brings a lot more external thought and everything into your lives when you're not on the same page. So maybe just as an aside, embrace the differences rather than just getting frustrated about them and blaming and all that. I think really at the end of the day, a little variety is key. Do you think? Do you want me to be more like you?
I think that we are very different.
If I was more like Scott, the house would be a lot messier.
In our taste of many different things. You're absolutely right. And it doesn't bother me one bit.
No, we love it. We love it. Welcome diversity. And if you're not all on the same page, enjoy and embrace. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining us this week. If you missed last week with Dave Shillelagh and Mass Vesta Dog, it was a kick-ass episode. Everybody is loving it. And I really think that we should support this organization. What could be better than giving police dogs bulletproof vests? Sounds great to me. Really good plan. We will see you next week. And in the meantime, keep it quirky.
Honk it up.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.